All right, here we go. I think we're recording now. Yeah, because it says pause or stop. Hello, everybody who couldn't make it. I'm recording this for you, and I think I'm sharing the correct screen now. Okay. What we're going to go over today is how to fill out an ICAO flight plan, and this is the video I usually show in class. I have to minimize it to show you where to download what you need. So if you go into modules real quick and you look at, here it is, since you're seeing this screen and now I know that. If you look at your 301 to 302 ICAO flight plan includes ICAO flight plan form. Click that link. You're going to see this. Must upload finished form in part 2. This is basically your homework. All it is an ICAO flight plan form. Disregard this first pilot checklist. Disregard that completely. I don't care that this is like your note. The second page here, which I call the front page, if you printed it, this would be on the front, is your international flight plan. And this is what you're filling out. So we're going to go through the video, and as he talks, I want you to fill it out. But here's your instructions for the basic homework we're doing. Is make up a November number. So November, whoops, it's not letting me, 7, 6, I think I have to hit tab every time I put something in. Okay, I made up a November number, right? And then as we go, obviously we're gonna do an IFR flight plan, some IFR rules, type of flight will be Gulf, number is 1. He'll go over it in the video why that is. Here's the crux of the matter. We're in a Cessna 172. Obviously, we're in a light wake turbulence category. And then equipment, he goes over in the video. I'm going to leave that blank for now. The departure aerodrome. So this form is going to require you to think of a departure aerodrome. I suggest your hometown. I'm trying to think of what Lancaster, Pennsylvania's ICAO is right now. Pull up Sky Vector. Just get it preloaded so that you can start with the route of flight and get it in here properly while we're watching the video. I think Lancaster, I grew up in Lancaster, PA. So I am going to go. I have no idea what that is. Probably need air nav. Right now, while I'm doing this, look up your own hometown ICAO if you don't know it. I'm going to just do Philly. I was close enough, right? So you make up a time that you want to leave. I want to leave at 6 in the morning Zulu. Those are always Zulu. Cruising speed for Cessna 172. Give me an idea. 120? Anyone?
Can I do Prescott, please?
It's so boring.
Well, it's Honolulu.
That's fine. Go to the other neighboring islands.
Okay.
Find yourself a route of flight. Yeah. KHON. What's it? Give me a cruising speed. I can't hear.
105.
17, yeah. 105.
Oh gosh, 105, seriously. All right. 105.
They're not fast.
That's awesome. Your flight level will depend, because we're IFR, it's going to depend on your route of flight. So obviously if you're going east, it's going to be on. If you're going west, of course I did. Pick a destination aerodrome within range of a Cessna 172. So how far can you fly on a full bag of gas in a Cessna 172?
About 6 hours.
Yeah.
So let's not fly 6 hours just to be safe. Let's fly like 2 hours.
Darn it.
It's up to you, totally. So what you're gonna do is you're actually gonna put your route of flight and pick a nice destination aerodrome of your choice. And however long it would theoretically take you, realistically, put that in there. It's up to you. It's gonna be like a point A to point B, not a round trip. So that's your route. Is everyone getting this? Any questions on this so far? You get to decide, you know, what your endurance is. You can call it 7 or whatever you think. Person's on board, I don't care. Make it up. Don't make it unrealistic though. I'm gonna go look at all of these. And then your emergency radio, all of this stuff is covered in the video. So let's just launch into the video. Are you all ready with the downloaded stuff? You got your form in front of you? You got
I already started filling it out.
Okay, cool. Yeah, fill it out while he's talking. I find this one to be helpful, but I will tell you, take some of the weird obscurities with a grain of salt, because he does get started talking about what do you call it? He talks about a field that's not an ICAO field, and it gets a little bit obscure, but it's interesting. That's just irrelevant for this class. So here we go. Can you all see it?
Do you have the link to this video on
Yes.
Canvas?
Let me go escape on this. I'll show you where it's at. So here it is. It's
Okay.
inside the lecture. Here's the lecture itself. I should probably open that and get it started downloading. So here's this video. You can watch it as many times as you want. And then this is your form. Be careful about this fillable PDF thing. These things they can be kind of screwy to fill in. Like you can fill the whole thing and go, yes, save changes. And sometimes I have it dump. So hopefully you're a little more tech savvy than I am, but cancel. All right. All right, now that we're all ready, feel free to rewatch all of this later and ask me as many questions as you have. I'm always up on this bad boy right here. So,
hey everyone, it's Joe Standley from FlightInstructorJoe.com. From everything I've been reading lately, the FAA is going to start requiring people to use ICAO flight plans for their domestic flights. This is supposed to happen by October 1st, 2016, from what I understand. And many people have not even used an ICAO flight plan before. So I decided to put together this little tutorial to give you an idea of what's coming up and how to use it. So this is a new flight plan form that you are going to be required to use. It's got 3 sections. The top section, the priority section. This is the first of 3 sections on the ICAO flight plan. You can pretty much ignore this section because it is to be completed by the air traffic facility. So you will never be using this.
That goes for you guys too. And yes, this is a little dated. He's talking about this being new. It was 4 years ago now.
Leaves the message area right here. And the message area is this whole area right there. And this is where the main part of your flight plan would be. The supplementary information section down here is basically information which we'll talk about later too. So these are the 2 sections that you would be using. The top one, you wouldn't even use that. So let's review, starting with the top section here, what each of these boxes is going to be for. This is the main part of your flight plan where you would begin filling out the information. Starting with item number 7, this is the aircraft identification. This is where you put your aircraft tail number. So let's put a tail number in there, and we'll just put a fake tail number in there.
Sorry.
So we'll just say we have aircraft 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The second box here is the flight rules. This is where you're going to file whether you are a VFR or an IFR flight. Now there's different sections here. If you look at the drop-down menu, we have I, V, Y, and Z. I is for IFR flights. V is for VFR flights. The other ones are for composite flight plans, or the composite flight plan starting off.
Okay. Have any of you ever used a composite flight plan?
No.
Nope.
No, neither have I. And
Nope.
why do you think that is, in theory? Anyone?
IFR is just easier.
Well, IFR is super easy. So my daily life was a composite flight plan. So leaving Hurlburt Air Force Base to go fly nighttime low level, right? So we did all of that VFR, but we had an IFR clearance to get out and to shoot an approach down into Anniston, Alabama. So long story short, I'd file IFR and then, hey, you just key the mic and go cancel IFR. Roger, squawk 1200. So this whole thing kind of puzzles me. I guess some people actually file composite flight plans. So it may actually, if you go get hired by, say, a business jet company, it may be company policy to use a composite flight plan or something like that. But in my experience, you just cancel IFR. And if you're out there flying VFR and you want to go IFR, what do? Anyone?
Pick it up in the air.
Yeah. Usually when this happens, it'll be weather's closing in and things are not looking good, and you're going to go ahead and just file IFR with the controller you're with. So long story short, you're typically just going to see an I and a V, and for your homework, you're going to be IFR.
IFR, and then going to VFR. After that, you would use Y. A composite flight plan starting under VFR would use the letter Z. We're just going to do an example for an IFR flight today. So we're going to put IFR flight. In the type of flight section, there's also a drop-down menu that has these different letters here. G, for example, which we're going to put in the type of flight, stands for general aviation flight. So if you're a general aviation flight, you can put G in that box.
You're
The
gonna
other
put G.
options for the drop-down menu, we have S, which is scheduled air services, N, which is non-scheduled air transport operations, M, which is military, and X, if there's any other kind of category not defined above. So those are the different sections and the different options. So you can see that we would be using G most of the time or all the time for a general aviation flight. Item 9, they want the number of the aircraft in the flight plan here. You can leave this blank and it will default to 1, or you can put a 1 in the box. But if you're doing formation flying with other aircraft, you would put the number of aircraft in formation in this box. So we'll just leave it blank here, but you could put 0, 1 right there if you wanted to. But if you were flying with anybody else, you would have to put the number of aircraft in that position. The type of aircraft, you must use the appropriate designator. The designators, we'll go over to the website and I'll show you in a second, but if you don't write it exactly like it's supposed to be, they will not accept it. So a good way to double check and make sure that you're putting the right designator in is to go to the ICAO website. So right here, we have the International Civil Aviation Organization website, and we have this search box over here. So we want to search for the kind of airplane that we have. So we're just going to click on search. And there's some options here. We can choose the manufacturer. Let's say I want to choose.
By the way, guys, this is exactly what I was talking about when I said this guy gets into these weird, deep obscurities. Do you see what I'm saying? Everybody knows here that a Cessna 172 is C172. And if you don't know your aircraft designator, we have bigger problems, in my opinion.
There's a Piper because
This is how you look it up if you have a Piper or whatever and you don't know what to call it.
PA 28/151. There's different ways that people put this in there. So if you don't know for sure exactly how it's supposed to be labeled, then you would go here just to double check and make sure you have it done the right way. We're going to narrow this down to a land plane with 1 engine, just so we don't have to go through a bigger list. So we're going to hit search right now. Now the search menu that comes up right at the top here is a type designator right here. So we have the list of the planes over here and the type designator. So we're looking for the designator. So we're going to slide down and we're going to look and see if we can find Piper Warrior, for example. That's what we'll just use for this example. So looking over here, I have found a Piper Warrior. We have a PA 28/160 or 151 or 150. And if you look at the designators over here, they are all P28 alpha. So that's what we're going to use for our designator. So going back to the flight plan page now, the type of aircraft, this is where we're going to put P28 alpha, and that will take care of that. We also have a wake turbulence category. The wake turbulence categories is dependent on the weight of your airplane. There are 3 different weight categories. There's light, medium, and heavy. If you look at the drop-down list right here, we can see the different categories here. So light is to indicate the aircraft type with a maximum certificated takeoff weight of 15,500 pounds or less. So we're going to fall in the light category, so we're going to put an L there. Item 10 is next. This is where you would list out all the radio communication, navigation, and approach aid equipment and capabilities you have in your plane using a letter for each item. If you have standard NAVCOM approach aid equipment consisting of VHF radio, VOR, and ILS, then you can use the letter S, which stands for standard equipment. If you don't have the standard equipment or you have additional equipment, you will add the letters from the following list. So here's a list of some standard equipment that some general aviations would have that I've highlighted in red. For example, we have D, which stands for DME. We have L, which is for ILS, G for GPS, and O for VOR. So we know.
Okay, I'm going to pause it here. Somebody tell me what you have at Embry-Riddle.
DME, ILS, GPS.
Pretty much. So just go ahead and put that in your equipment suffix there, or in the equipment box. And then he talks about the suffix after the slash here in just a bit. So once again, I'm not going to nitpick you on this, because when you get hired by a company, like for example, the United States Air Force used to give me pretty much a fully filled out one. The only blanks that I had, because the equipment was like standard per aircraft, right? The only blanks I had were the aircraft identification, and can't remember what else was blank. Whoever our navigator was would fill out the route of flight, and then I'd put in personal information, stuff like that. But this equipment suffix was pre-printed on all of our ICAO flight plan forms.
You know, the standard includes an ILS and a VOR and the communication radio that we discussed. So we could have that, but if we had any additional equipment, we would add additional letters in there. So if you had the standard items plus DME and GPS, you would put SDG in box 10. If you don't have any equipment or none of the equipment is serviceable, use an N, which stands for nil. There's a little slash mark after the items you put in the box right here. There's a little slash right there. Right after that, this is where you put the type of surveillance equipment you have. So what do I mean by that? Surveillance equipment and capabilities. This refers to your transponder and ADS-B capability. Make sure you know what type of equipment you have and use the appropriate letter or letters for the equipment you have. Use one or more of the descriptors, but only enter one transponder code. So here's a list of transponder codes. And you would choose from the list of what you have for your transponder code, and you would put that after the slash. If you had ADS-B, then you would find out what ADS-B information you have, and you would add that right next to the transponder. So if you had a transponder with mode C, you would put C right here. And then if you had, additional codes to add, you would add it right after that.
Do we have any in-flight instructors here that know which ADS-B codes we have at Embry-Riddle?
It's
I think we
HU2.
have U2, yeah.
You two, okay, so use that. Just go ahead and use what you have at Embry-Riddle. That's my suggestion. Unless you own an airplane or you want to get fancy and change it. But this is,
Oh, sorry.
you go ahead, sorry.
Just for the equipment, I pulled up the stuff off the flight website. It's SBGYR for the other equipment.
Perfect, there you go. This is really just sort of familiarizing you with what this form looks like.
And again, just as in the last thing, if you don't have a transponder or ADS-B or it is not serviceable, use N for nil. So we're just going to put SDG in this box here. And for our equipment capability, showing that we have the standard, and we also have DME and GPS. And after the hash mark here, we're going to put C, showing we have a mode C transponder. Box number 13 is the departure aerodrome, which means your departure airport. This is where you put your departure airport, and the line after that is where you put your estimated time of departure, just like you would with any other flight plan. So you put your 4-letter identifier of the airport in box 13, and the estimated departure time in Zulu time next to it. If the airport identifier has only 3 letters, such as 3 Charlie Kilo, then it is not recognized as an ICAO airport. In this case, you would put 4 Z's in the boxes instead. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'll explain in a minute. For the departure time, we were just going to put any example in here. We'll just say that we are departing at 1500 Zulu. Basically, most airports have a K in front of the name, like K DPA for DuPage or K ORD for Chicago. Those are ICAO recognized airports. One that does not have a K in front of it, usually with a number, is usually not recognized, in which case you would have to put ZZZZ here. And then in the line 18 down here is where you would put the information about that airport. Now, I've personally talked to the flight service stations around here and asked if we could just put a K in front of it. And they said sometimes they recognize that, and you can do that. I have noticed that flightplan.com does put a K in front of it in the actual flight plan, even though it does not have a K.
Sorry, I was trying to download the slides and it popped up in the middle of the video. He's just talking about this obscure issue where if you have, has anyone flown into a little airport that does not have an identifier? You guys experienced that yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, so technically, I don't know. I have never really flown into a place like that, but this is the proper way to do it, so he says.
In front of it, it seems to work. So they said you could try it, and some airports work that way and some don't. But if it does not work and you are required to do it this way, then you would put the departure airport for all Z's in 13, and in 18 down here, you would put the identifier for the airport and the name of the airport afterwards, following the letters DEP with a slash. That stands for departure airport. So let me write down an example of what that looks like. And that's what you would put in the remarks section. So now they know that this airport that you have up here, that is not an ICAO airport, is listed down here. Okay, going back to line 15, the cruising speed box, number 15, is where you will put your true airspeed. When filling this out, the airspeed has to be in a 4-digit number following the letter N. The letter N means that the number is in knots. If you're filing in kilometers per hour, you would use a K. So don't get them confused. The N stands for knots. The K stands for kilometers per hour.
That is confusing.
An example of a plane filing at 110 knots would be N0110. That would be when you would put in there for 110 knots. The level refers to the cruising altitude you would be flying. The altitude is written with the letter A followed by a 3-digit cruising altitude in hundreds of feet. For example, if you plan on cruising at 4,000 feet, you would put A040. If you want to cruise at 6,500 feet, you would put A065. So in this example, we're going to pretend we're cruising at 4,000 feet. So we're going to put the A in there because 0 or 0 would be 4,000 feet. If we were cruising at the flight levels above 18,000 feet, you would do the same thing, except you would substitute the A with an F for flight level. So remember, A for altitude, F for flight levels. The route is a section where you put all the points between the departure and the destination airports. If you are flying from one fix to another, you need to write down all the waypoints separated by DCT, which stands for direct to. For example, Northport VOR would be OBK, then you would put DCT. Rockford VOR would be RFD, then you would put DCT. Polo VOR would be PLL. So if you're flying between those, you would have DCT between each one of those sections. If you're flying along a published route, then list all the fixes along that route separated by a space instead of using the direct to symbol. In line 16, we have our destination aerodrome. That's our destination airport. The same rules apply here as if they did when you fill out the departure airport information. If you're using 4 Z's for your destination airport, then you have to put the identifier of the airport and the name of the airport on line 18 again, following the letters DEST with a slash. That stands for destination. So before we use our departure airport, and this one would be destination. Okay, we're just going to put Cedar Rapids in here, for example. That would be our destination airport, Cedar Rapids, with our route of flight being OBK to Rockford to Polo, and then there. Just a note, you can also use line 18 for remarks. For example, you didn't want any flight plan that would take you over water, and you want to put no over water in the remarks, you could put that also in the section 18. The box next to the destination airport is where you put your total estimated elapsed time, shown as total EET. This is just the estimated time to fly to your destination, written in hours and minutes. This is okay for domestic trips, but more detail is needed for international flying. Our total time to the airport would go here in hours and minutes. Our total flight time, for example, let's say an hour and 20 minutes. So we put 0, 1, 2, 0 as our time en route. Our alternate airports would go right here. If you have any alternates, you would put it in alternate aerodrome or second alternate aerodrome if you have 2 alternates. The supplementary section is next here. And this information is not going to be transmitted with a flight plan, but it is kept for emergency purposes. It's like for search and rescue information. So starting with number 19, next to the E, where there's E and a slash, this is where you put the total fuel available in hours and minutes. So we're going to assume that we have 5 hours and 20 minutes of fuel. So we would put 0, 5, 2, 0 for our fuel, 5 hours and 20 minutes of fuel on board. Next to that, there's a P, and it stands for the people on board the airplane. How many people do you have on board? This is where you would put the total amount of people on board. So we have just 2 people in this example, and that will complete that. So remember, this section is more for search and rescue information. So we have the E, that stands for the endurance, for how much fuel we have. We have P, for that stands for how many people on board. Now we have R, this is for the type of radio, emergency radios you have available in your airplane. Now we have UHF radio, VHF radio, and ELT. If you have an ELT, you would leave that marked. If you have a VHF radio that can transmit at 121.5, you would leave that in there. But most small planes do not have a UHF radio, so we would put an X through that. So this is showing we have R, we have radios on board, and these are the 2 types of radios we have. The survival equipment section is not required in the ICAO flight plans. To use this section, you would put the letter S in the first box to indicate that you have the specific survival equipment on board, and then put the first letter of the item listed that you have, such as P for polar, D for desert, M for maritime, and J for jungle. So right here, if we had any of this survival equipment right here, we would put an S right here. And since we don't have any of that equipment, then we're just going to put an X through it right there. So if we had some of this equipment in here, if we had desert equipment, for example, we would X out every one of the things that we don't have, and we would leave, and this would have an S in.
Okay, I'm pretty sure at Embry-Riddle you guys have what, desert equipment,
Yeah.
correct?
Desert
then-
and jungle, I think.
I don't think we have jungle.
That's what the flight supplement shows.
Oh, sweet. So we-
Oh, never mind. Scratch that. It's on the next line.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm struggling how to get the S in here though. Like every time I try to click on it to put the S, it just puts an X through it.
okay, let me see what I can do here. Okay, so it looks like you X it out. So it'll be blank. Do you see what I'm doing? Just X them. What S are you trying to do? This?
Yeah, that.
You leave that blank if you have any of it. I know his has a different format, but just leave it blank. That means you have some of it, and then leave the desert blank and X the rest of them out. And then jackets. What do you have for jackets? Do you have anything? Probably not.
No, nothing.
Okay, we can pretty much stop the video at this point, and I can explain the rest of it. I'm just gonna X out jackets altogether. But if your jackets had a light on it, or like a fluorescent strobe, or better yet, a UHF or VHF radio and beacon, then you would say it had everything except fluorescent, you would just X that out. But since we have nothing, and then dinghies, you don't have dinghies. Cessna 172 does not have dinghies. I believe the C-130 had 4. We had 4. What?
Can you just put the X through the D then if you don't have anything?
Exactly. So, and then you don't have a cover. You don't have any of that stuff. The color of your aircraft is going to be white and blue.
I think that's for dinghies.
Was that? Yeah, sorry, my bad. I can't seem to cut and paste here. You're right, white and blue. And if you have any markings, and then whatever remarks you want to make, which you don't need to make. And then here's the big thing for your turning in. Obviously, you're going to turn it in online under your name, but I usually do it that way. So put yourself as the pilot in command for the flight, and then save it. You can do it before this class even ends. You can go ahead and save it and submit it. And then that takes care of all of the requirements of this entire,
And we would
lecture.
leave desert there.
let me get
But
rid
since we
of
don't
this
have any
video.
of the equipment here, we can just X out the very.
Okay, so he just goes on and on about that. So basically what I'm going to do now is quickly hit the slides that we were going to go over in class. Do you have questions? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so how much distance are you looking for? It's like, all right, we're doing a quick 30-minute flight from El Paso to Del City, Van Horn and back, or can it be domestic, or does it have to be, okay, we're going from El Paso to Mexico?
My intent with this exercise is simply to familiarize you with the form. It doesn't have to be any set distance. I figured if you're flying about an hour or two from your hometown to another, like point A to point B, that's fine. If you want to do a round trip, that's fine too. So I'm going to leave that up to you. As long as you submit something that's in proper format, which is not hard to do. After you watch the video, it's pretty easy to do. Make sure your Cessna 172 altitude is not going to be above, what, 12 grand? So you're not going to be putting an FL. It's not a flight level. It's an A. And then N for knots. Those are the types of things I look at when I go look at the assignment. But just to refresh in case you came in late, under the assignments tab, the way you upload this is going to be under part 2. It's going to say, where is it? Hometown. See that? Flight plan exercise hometown part 2. Once you get it all filled out and saved, go ahead and just do a file upload, and then I'll see you in the speed grader and I'll take a look at your link right here. See. Then
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Why is part 2 due on the 22nd, part 1's due on the 24th?
I'm not sure. Probably because I didn't update it. Let me see. When did I have it on the schedule?
And what kind of questions are in part 1?
Hmm?
Oh, is part 1 going over the slides we're going over next? Is that what it's over?
I guess I gave you till Sunday to fill this out, which is kind of silly. But I left the original due date. I mean, you guys don't need till Sunday to fill this out. You can probably get it done by the end of class. But for those people that aren't here that need to watch the playback of this, I'm just going to give them a little more time. It's fine. This one, let's see, 301 to 303. So your upload is due March 22, and part 1 is due March 24. So I guess I'm giving you extra time on this. If you want less time, I can delete that. It's fine.
We're good.
I did just kind of try really hard to explain all of the things I just explained in here. Like I said, I'm really loose and free with how you do this. I just kind of want to see you fill out a flight plan form. And if you go look at this 301 to 303 ICAO flight plan exercise part 1, it's actually a Canvas quiz. Inside the Canvas quiz, you'll find just a really brief couple of questions about the slideshow I'm about to go over. So as I'm going over it, you can open this up and follow along, and you're going to get a lot of answers out of this. And feel free to ask as well. So if there aren't any more questions on the homework for now, I will start this slideshow. Anyone question?
Which quiz is it again?
At 301 to 303, there's part 1 and part 2.
Oh.
Part 2 is just the upload of that PDF form. So, hi, I'm Captain Pete Schlichting. I've worked for Mesa Airlines, States West, America West. I'm just kidding. Usually me and Pete switch classes and he comes to give this lecture for me. So sadly, we can't do that this semester. He has a pretty good spiel. He talks about his wind component chart and like just kind of a basic, here's what the airlines do. Tailwind's bad in the airline. Especially during a check ride, they'll ask you to explain to them how to actually find things in the charts, and he goes into method 1 versus method 2. So this is kind of like off topic for class, but this is something that Pete talks about as like an industry, you know, a little input for you guys. Method 1, manual takeoff data, tailwind takeoff data is something you're only going to do on a check ride, usually. That's what he says. Which involves going, all right, I'm in an A321 today, and do I have a sharklet? Then I don't do any correction. There you go. V1 correction for tailwinds, NA. If you've got CFM engines and no sharklets, then you subtract 1 knot for every 10 knots of tailwind. Long story short, he said they almost always use method 2, which is basically type into the dispatcher, hey, we have a tailwind, give me new data. Okay. His quick reference guide, he goes into this in great detail. It's kind of interesting. He's talking about a decision matrix. So in the airlines, when you've got wind, weight, temperature, variation, you have to go through, oh my gosh, okay, load, closeout, check. Standard thrust is planned by TPS. TPS being what? Does anyone know what that acronym stands for? No? All right, wow, it's basically the performance data. I'm blanking on what TPS actually stands for, but the something planned performance data. I'll have to ask Pete. If your actual takeoff weight is say heavier than, your takeoff weight is heavier than ATOW, then you've got to go all the way through this and basically request new performance data. Lighter than or equal to, which is going to happen pretty much every day, unless someone makes a mistake, you use flex thrust. Okay, and then this is just a zoom in. Temp variation, I won't go into too much more of what he talks about. Basically, this is a real live airline decision matrix that you're gonna have to follow every day. Wind variation has another decision matrix. It's pretty, when you're pushing the limits every day, say in an A321, especially with a short runway, there's a lot of decisions to be made. And then here's your takeoff and manual landing limitations. It looks fairly complicated, but it's pretty easy. Here's your landing and takeoff limitations. So 50 knots, including gusts. Get a 35 knot crosswind. That's pretty heavy crosswind right there. But they're not very tailwind resistant. Notice you only get 10 knots in the A320 and 321 and 15 knots in the A319 for a tailwind component. Questions for Pete? It's more fun when Pete's here to answer questions about American Airlines. Does anyone know Professor Schlichting? You guys have him for class?
I've had him for class.
Okay. Yeah, some of you won't have him yet. He teaches AS420, which is the flight technique analysis class, and it goes into a lot of these kinds of things where you're talking about right after you take off, what's the entire sequence of events and things like that. You wouldn't believe how complicated it can get. Now,
he's also teaching dispatch this summer.
Oh yeah, he's teaching dispatch too. I forgot that he was doing that. So we're gonna get into the really easy stuff now, international weather, where you guys can just sit back and take a breather. And there's only 3 or 4 real takeaways from this. Some of which I'm gonna go over once again when we talk about Project 2, which is our Philadelphia to Heathrow project. So if you're departing the US for a foreign destination, you might actually have ICAO weather, unless you're in the US military. I added that because in the US military, all of our weather comes from these handy people that work for the DOD. They may be in Spain or wherever, but they're still giving us everything in American, which is great. You guys might actually have to read international weather. So I made a point to find a flight plan. Actually, Pete Schlichting gave it to me for your project that involves reading 2 different formats of flight. So when you leave Philadelphia, you've got a standard United States format with feet. When you arrive in London Heathrow, you have to read ICAO weather. Not complicated once you understand this lecture. As for the background on how all of this came about, ICAO has annexes. This is your meteorological service for international air navigation. Very formal. That's the link if you want to go ahead and look into it. I believe this link still works. It's fascinating stuff. You're bored in your dorm room and you have nothing better to do. That's great. Go look at it. As for the project, everything's sort of self-contained in Project 2. So you'll have all the weather, you'll have all the explanations here. You can always ask me a question if you don't understand something, but we do not, luckily, have super bad weather for that project. So you don't have to think through too many of these obscurities. In the US, we almost always report weather in statute miles, as you're probably familiar with. And this is really weird to get your head around, but we report maximum visibility. So if it says 3 statute miles of visibility, that's absolutely the most you're going to be able to see. If you go to, say, Heathrow, and they give you 3 statute miles, that means 3 statute miles the minimum you're going to see. So they, in a way, I find this slightly lazy. So if they say 3 statute miles, it could be 10. You see what I'm saying? It could be 10. They could just not have updated it. So that's the minimum visibility you're going to see. In the US, it's a little more restrictive. If you have, say, you're right at minimums, that's it. You're right at minimums. Questions on this? Maximum versus minimum? Good news is we don't have any more tests. All we have is silly Kahoots. So you really don't have to commit these things to memory. It's just for your own information.
But we have a final exam though, right?
You do, but the final is not, it's not a true final. It's going to be exactly what you did for project 1. You know how you inputted all your answers off your form into Canvas? That's what you do for project number 2. So you come to the final with all the answers written down. And
it's project 2 final essentially.
Yeah, it's nearly impossible if you care about your grade to get anything but an A+ on the final exam. So that's the good news.
Okay.
It's good. And between now and whenever it is, April 24th, me and Michaela are here to help you work through it. But we're not going to start it yet until Tuesday because I'm going to cut a little bit out of it. So back to this real quick. CAV okay means ceiling and visibility okay. I'm sure you've seen it before. In ICAO rules, it means visibility is over 10 kilometers. So CAV okay, to me, CAV okay is CAV okay. It means good weather, good visibility, but it could be kilometers. No clouds are below 5,000 feet or below the MSA, which is nice. No cumulonimbus, no precip. Have you guys seen these quadruple nines in the United States?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay. Thanks for staying awake, staying with me here. Good visibility in the United States with the triple nines means 10 nautical miles. In ICAO rules, it could be 10 kilometers. So it's neither here nor there. It's good. Good viz is good biz. As far as cloud coverage, it's all the same stuff we're used to. Cloud coverages are always in feet in the US, so you don't need that information. In ICAO, it might be in meters. So VV, or vertical visibility, shall be reported in meters or feet. It depends on where you go. Just make sure you know which one they're reporting it in so that you're legal. You might get millibars. There's a really easy conversion, just basically sea level pressure. You can always key the mic and say, state altimeter setting. Seriously, if they give you hectopascals and you don't have one of those automated systems where you can toggle it in and show it in inches of mercury, just ask. They'll give it to you. They might make fun of you, but they'll give it to you. Here's your altimeter setting, hectopascal, millibar, inches chart. I had almost this exact same chart on my knee board. These days, with these fancy newfangled jets, you actually have a way, if you input, say, 27.88 inches, it'll actually show you millibars digitally. If anyone's going to go fly an Airbus, this whole thing is a moot point because the airplane calculates it for you. We're going to look at Narita, Japan real quick for an example. Most of this is going to be pretty familiar. You've got the same kind of identifier as far as the 8th of the month, right? The time, and then it covers 18Z on the 8th until 18Z on the 9th. Here's your surface wind, same thing as at home. You may actually see kilometers per hour or meters per second, which would be highly confusing, right? I would have trouble with the forecast in meters per second. You will just have to sit down, pre-flight plan, and convert everything if you get one of these that is in meters. So here it is. If you get, you know what, your E6B, oh my gosh, I have one handy on my desk. Look at this wonderful instrument that I forced you all to buy. You can convert all of these things right here in the comfort of your own home. Here, it actually doesn't give you an M. It just gives you 3,000, and you have to infer that it's meters. I know. As far as the significant weather forecast, you have drifting snow and mist. It might include a minus or plus, just like in the US. But the vicinity thing, VC, did anyone see that before? Within 8,000 meters from the center of the runway. We don't use that as much in the US as they do in ICAO rules. So you might see a lot more VCs. Broken at 5,000 feet is, so they're mixing meters and feet just to make you as confused as humanly possible. There's a 40% probability here between 1,400 and 1,600 Z of winds varying between 290 and 350 at 20 knots, gusting to 40. So lots of information in this wind block right here. That was pretty obscure, right? You're not going to see anything like this on your project. It's going to be pretty straightforward. Here's a London Gatwick example. Whoops, sorry. So this is our METAR for Gatwick, 13 Zulu, and it's basically an hourly observation. Surface wind is variable at 2. Did you know there's different definitions of variable from the United States to ICAO rules? There you go. Direction varying more than 60 degrees is 3 knots or less. Visibility in RVR. There's more, I would say, more detail given when it comes to visibility. And why is that? Has anyone been to the UK at all? Recently, I hope not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have.
You're there in the weather. I mean, in the winter.
Yeah, I have also.
I was there in December.
So the weather kind of sucks. So you're going to see a whole lot of detail when it comes to visibility and ceiling when you fly into places like Gatwick. This may not be, you know, in the south of France where the weather's nice and it's not so foggy, you may not see so many details, but here it's actually giving you, it's 1,500 meters to the south. So specifically the S. And then 4 left, RVR 500 meters and increasing, which is the up here. It's a really handy tool. I had to fly in and out of the UK quite a bit. And it's nice to know that if it's D, you're probably going home. You know what I'm saying? Like you can probably call it, but if it's U or increasing, then you want to say, all right, crew, we're going to sit around for the next 4 hours and wait for it to increase so we can take off. So it's kind of handy in that way for crews. Basically drifting snow and fog, same thing we're used to seeing. Vertical visibility, very popular in the UK. This is a good way to measure visibility when you've got a lot of fog. And then temperature dew point is the same designation as we're used to, and altimeter setting will be in the Q for hectopascals. You may not even get an altimeter setting, and in fact, your London weather has a Q, so you'll have to read that properly. Just ask if you have trouble reading it. This is a bad one. You got wind shear reported. I probably wouldn't take off in these conditions. Okay. Questions on any of that with London Gatwick before I move on? Okay. This is Russia, which is in, this place is in the Arctic Circle, and you can see from their METAR data how incredibly cold it is, which is crazy. Look at the minus 40, 45, ouch. So in this place, this example that I found here is pretty cool because they actually, hi baby, they actually require you to use QFE. So you've got a separate chart here for QFE with meters. Yes, baby, hold on. We got a really important question. Yes.
Can I have a bagel?
Can you wait until I'm done here? Or go ask
I
them?
can toast it.
Okay, go ahead.
I can toast it.
Sure. She wants a bagel. All right.
Yeah.
Sure. So you see what I'm working with here. For a couple hours. Yeah. So this is an interesting example just because of this mandatory QFE. If you don't have that, we call it the poor man's altimeter, where you have 2 separate systems and one is calibrated to be 0 when you land. you are not authorized to use this approach. And this is a very strange one. Kind of cool. That's because it's really cold. And when it's really cold, density is compressing the air and you could be flying lower than you actually think you are. So it's also terrain, mountains around there. Here's an excerpt from Project 2 that'll grasp the differences. Philadelphia versus London Heathrow. So Philly on the top, LHR on the bottom. Everything's pretty similar, except for this 9999 versus our 10 statute miles. And then what else? Get a Q1004 and then no SIG. So pretty easy to pick out the differences. They also don't bother giving pilots an SC level pressure because no one cares. Questions? Questions on that? Okay, so your quiz here should actually cover that. And then, where is it? 301 to 303, international weather. I did. Stand by, I'm pulling up the second slideshow real quick. Okay. This one is gonna be a little bit redundant to the video. So I'm gonna hop through the slides pretty fast when it comes to the stuff that explains how to do an ICAO flight plan, because I feel like the video is slightly better. So this is the background behind ICAO. International Civil Aviation Organization was founded in 1944, which really wasn't that long ago if you think about it. People have been flying around the world quite regularly before this, but they decided that, you know, we have to get together and make something standard or else we're going to have a real issue. By 1944, traffic was getting heavier and people were flying internationally a lot more. That's cream cheese. Yes. Okay. We now have almost 200 participating countries. There's a link there in case you want to take a look. The headquarters is still in Montreal. And there's a few different terminologies. You have AIS, or Aeronautical Information Service, and AIPs, Aeronautical Information Publications. And then PANS Ops is your procedures for air navigation services. This is just like your FAA.gov for international. If you actually go look up PANS Ops and go to the source document, just like FAA.gov, it looks eerily similar. So you can pull up all kinds of different regulations, all the ICAO annexes, things like that. If you're going to go fly internationally, you're going to do a lot of PANS Ops studying beforehand so that you don't bust anyone's rules and, you know, get jailed or, you know, shot down, something like that. I'm being mildly joking, but not really in this day and age. So, you know, the ICAO terminology, they use GNSS a lot more than we just call it GPS, but GNSS is a combination of all the systems. Some of you are going to write me a paper about it when you get to AS 411. And then they use the ICAO flight plan form, which I'm going to show you in abbreviated slides here. And a new term for you is a FIR, not like Toby's FIR. It is a flight information region. These are state borders in the air. I'll show you some pictures. FIR boundaries mean you've basically flown from, say, UK to Germany, and now you're operating under Germany's rules, and you're expected to understand them. Another thing that the military made me read was diplomatic clearances. A lot of times, countries won't let military airplanes in certain places, especially if we have armament, ways to shoot people, nuclear weapons on board, people with ammo and guns. So there's a lot of things you got to be really careful when you're going to fly around with guns, because some countries, they don't even want you to overfly them, like Turkey. ICAO annexes are basically like volumes or chapters in the publication of the PANS Ops. And here's all 19 annexes on the link, but I'll show you a couple of them. This is a standard numbering. If you want to look up, say, aeronautical charts, kind of like the AIM, Annex 4 is where you go. Airworthiness is Annex 8, very similar to FAA. I think the FAA ripped all this off from ICAO, honestly. Safety management is a new one. This is becoming more of a push. So we have a new Annex 19. I say new, I mean, how new? Almost 10 years ago now, that's crazy. And then just an example of something that's in Annex 5 is talking about SI units or non-SI units, which we talk about. In America, we've actually adopted the Celsius, but everything else we stood in our ground and said, no, we're not going to use meters, things like that. So we've come to an agreement with the rest of the world that it's okay. We're going to use feet in our country and we're going to use meters in yours if you choose. Aircraft registration codes, just FYI, not everybody's a November. The rest of the world uses different things, and sometimes it's multiple things. So like Libya has a 5 alpha before every general aviation aircraft, or I guess commercial aircraft also have these registration markings as well. Slightly different military, but FYI. As far as planning assistance, you've got a link here that gives you expert advice in planning assistance. There's a lot of resources out there that you're going to learn once you get on a job. Oh, high seas. You're going to be flying ICAO rules. So be familiar with ICAO rules before you fly over the high seas. And FARs are very similar, but if ICAO is more restrictive, you must comply with the more restrictive. That has almost bit me a couple times. Luckily, I had a crew, and someone on the crew mentioned, hey, you know what? This is more restrictive here. So give me a pair of scissors, babe. Okay, so can you give me like 5 minutes to finish this up? Questions on this before I move on? Okay. So those are the 2 lectures we're going to go over today. I'm going to wrap this up because obviously I've got someone who desperately needs some cream cheese on her bagel. It's very important. If you can go ahead and take this straw poll, I'll also send it out in a class announcement. These are good times for me. I mean, 7 o'clock in the morning, let's just not and say we did. I'm just saying, but everybody agreed. That's great. I prefer, does anyone prefer later, earlier? Anyone have a strong preference for meeting time?
1500.
1500 would be great. I would love 1500. So click on that 1500 and then that's me voting. Once I get a consensus, then it looks like this. Go ahead and make a decision. And then if you can't, you can always watch the playback. Awesome. I don't know how to stop, actually.
I have a question about the quiz.
Sure, this quiz right here? Yeah.
So like 9 and so on, it talks about like a NOTAM, but I can't find where that is.
Oh, shoot. That's because, shoot. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna delete them. Thank you, Rita. I don't even have my video feed up, but I know it's your voice. So what we're doing is we deleted that for this semester. I didn't realize there were questions about it. So if you find something like that that's really confusing, like what is she talking about? What is that question? Let me know. I think I deleted all of them now.
Wait, sorry, you cut out. What did you say?
Oh, I cut out. So the questions that I just deleted, those 3, were leading questions that allowed, if we were doing the original ICAO flight plan exercise that we used to do in class, which would be virtually impossible to do online, those were the questions that go with that. So it's saved. If you want to refresh it now, that would be awesome. Looks like no one started. All right.
It still shows up on my quiz.
Did you refresh?
Yeah. I guess I'll try again.
I'm pretty sure it's because she already opened it.
I just hit save and you probably already opened it. If it's not working and it still shows for you, just answer whatever and I'll correct it to give you the points.
From 9 on, right?
Yeah, the last 3 were associated with that first assignment. So I'm trying to have a little bit of mercy because that assignment was probably like a 10-hour job. And now by the end of this class, you should have this filled out. So it really shouldn't be that big of a deal, hopefully. I know you guys are kind of like me, probably not sleeping at night. Do I have bags under my eyes? Probably. Now I can't find I'll just pause this. Does anyone have questions that they want to share with the rest of the class before I stop the recording?
Let's say we do end up doing a class at 3 p.m. or something. I have flight at that time. Say we have class time, have to go to flight activity. Is there a way I can?
You're cutting out. Yeah, that's why I'm recording these. And you can always give me a call if you say you see something in the recording. You're like, what is she talking about? Just give me a call or a text or whatever you want. Some people are going to have to watch the recording instead of the live class. No attendance will be counted against you. I will count it for you. So if you show up to the meeting or you let me know that you can't make it, I'll always check you as attending, which will help your attendance grade. Good question. Anyone else?
I personally just like rather have morning because of flight block also.
I would love to be able to do 2 separate classes. I love you all, but I have these 2 children here at home with me. Unfortunately, I can't spend all day doing this, but shoot, do a vote. Put your vote in, and I'll try to adjust as much as I possibly can. And we can always switch it back and forth too. You know, we only have. Let me look at the schedule one more time. I think we only have 8 more meetings, and one of them is your final. So if you look at this, today's the 19th. We just got done. Yeah, so you've probably already submitted your ICAO flight plan. If you haven't, for those of you watching this on playback, if you have any questions on it, please just call me. Old-fashioned phone. And then we have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We only have 6 more classes in this whole semester. Can you believe that? You guys are going to be really, really big. If you go to assignments, like I mentioned earlier, please don't download Project 2 yet. I think I should probably go ahead and unpublish it. I'm going to do some work on that this weekend. So, all right. Let me know if you have any issues finishing Project 1 or if you have any questions on the homework. And you're too shy to ask in front of everyone, that's fine. You can text me. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Okay, how do I do this?
It's bagel time.
Bagel time.